so everybody can go and have lunch nice and quietly. So, having said that, let's go and start. Let's see what I'm gonna do. I'll put this here. Yes. Okay. So these are the objectives from the webinar today. Uh, because of the time we have, we will concentrate basically on these two objectives. Uh, the table of contents that you will see next basically was prepared for a 6-hour class for a subsea pipeline design course for a graduate program. So basically today I'll be talking about flow assurance from a perspective of a pipeline engineer, which is where I am. I call myself a luxury plumber. And since we will take questions at the end of the session, what I did is I brought basically, you will have here at the end of the session a fantastic expert on flow assurance. I would say one of the most flow assurance people that you can find in the world, which is Professor or Dr. Juan Manzano. He's gonna join. He's gonna join at any time. At the end of the day, this is like the joke. I'm gonna be the driver teaching you this class, and the actual professor will be in the back, helping me with all the difficult questions, which I think I can handle all the questions. But anyhow, just to give a little bit more formality, and even if we have, really deep questions that require Juan's Manzano expertise, that will be fine. Great. So, having said that, this is the table of contents. What we're going to be covering here is mostly those two things. Going to be a big idea from going to the reservoir to the end user, and we're going to go about flow assurance and operability 101, and then we're going to be talking a lot about risk mitigations, um, mitigation of flow assurance risks, hybrid rocks, asphalting scale, slides, emulsions, erosion control, all of those issues that you see there. On the two-phase liquid gas flow, we will touch the most important points, which is liquid holdup and the superficial velocities. And we'll talk a little bit about flow patterns. And then we will touch a little bit on the scope of work, what you need to know if you are not an expert to ask the right questions to the experts. So this is what we have here. The key learning point of this slide is understand where flow assurance has the most important impact in the overall picture of hydrocarbons from the reservoir to the end user. And this is the oil and gas industry in a big picture and how the hydrocarbons flow from one another, from the reservoir to the end user. You can see clearly in the background 3 areas of the industry that is structured: upstream, exploration and production, midstream, storage and transportation, and downstream, which is refiners and petrochemicals. Extracting the hydrocarbons from the reservoir would require all this infrastructure to move the hydrocarbons from the reservoir to the processing facility. I'm not saying anything that you guys do not know at the moment. Pipelines are mainly used to keep moving all these products until they are used by the end user. And you obviously you use another way to transport hydrocarbons like trains, trucks, ships, and then you have also storage infrastructure that is used to hold the products, assuring the availability and delivery of those products. So, in order to move the hydrocarbons from from one point to another point, the energy is provided via pumps and compressors. And since the products are sold at different parties, specific pieces of equipment such as valves, SCADA, mill stations are used to allow the different transactions. For example, the SCADA is a system that integrates all the components of the pipeline transportation system and means supervisory control and data acquisition. So the operators use basically the SCADA to optimize the operations, or take remedial actions in case it is needed. So today, what we're going to be looking at is basically this part of the picture. We will refer to flow assurance and specifically moving hydrocarbons from the reservoir to the processing facility, either offshore or onshore. And the first concept that we need to understand is, I think, is gathering system. So let's go on that. Basically, here the idea. Let me move what I have here. I can put this one here, and I have the group chat up here. Great. Uh, the key learning point of this slide is basically understand the concept of gathering system from both offshore and the onshore environment. And basically, we're going to be talking about export and product and export product and production product, which defines what a flow line and an export pipeline is. And from from the in the onshore side of the business, we talk about delivery pipeline, transportation, distribution of product, and in the onshore, in the offshore, we talk about flow line, production risers, export pipeline, and manifold plate and champers, which is basically all this infrastructure that we have as subsea. Basically, the main concept here is to understand that the production of flow lines, they transport product comes from the reservoir, which is two-phase flow, so it's production fluid, and after it's processed at the host or the onshore, it's going to be export as an export pipeline. So that's the main difference between flow line and pipeline when we talk about these two subjects. Well, what I'm going to do here also is I'm going to stop that. I'm going to put that here so everything is, so I don't bother with my picture. What I'm going to ask you, Celine, is also to put your video so they don't bother with your picture in the presentation if they have, they can move it around, but some people have only one monitor and the picture can be on the slide. Okay. Anyhow, how oil was formed? I think this is quite simple. People understand this, and that the oil is basically a porous rock filled with hydrocarbons formed through millions of years under the effect of huge pressures and temperatures. So the idea here of this now with the reservoir is to understand how it is produced from the reservoir. In this case, you can have primary recovery or natural dry mechanisms. It's important to understand that we don't have a pool of oil. We have a porous saturated rock. And the natural drive mechanisms, which is basically the hydrocarbons are trapped in the reservoir, and depending on how these hydrocarbons are formed, the reservoir will behave differently when we drill the hole in it by following different reservoir natural mechanisms, which are basically the primary recovery method to produce oil. And they can be either dissolved gas drive, which is the result of the expansion of the gas that is dissolved in the oil. A perfect example will be the Coca-Cola can when you open it up. The gas cap drive, which is the result of the expansion of the gas, which is contained in the reservoir above the oil. And then the water drive, which is the result of the upward pressure of water as it expands and move into the regions of lower pressure as oil is produced. So just remember that a lot of people refer to oil drive, gas drive, and water drive reservoir mechanisms, which is not exactly correct. Okay, you have dissolved gas, gas cap drive, and water drive, but people talk about oil drive, gas drive, and water drive for those three cases. These natural drive mechanisms are what we call the primary recovery, and typically are in the order of 15 to 20%. So let's see what the other recovery methods that we have. This is the different types, as I mentioned, and this is the primary. Whereas the primary, you can see here is the fluid that comes out of a typical. It's a combination of crude oil and natural gas mixed with water and non-hydrocarbon gases and other impurities as and they have a reservoir and a temperature conditions of the reservoir. So we have a mix in this. What we have in the reservoir, I'm trying to tell you, is basically liquid, gas, water, and other impurities. So we will basically have, it's not a one-phase flow, it's a two-phase or three-phase flow. And we have to deal in flow assurance with this type of flowing conditions. So as you can see here, in the natural, the primary, we have either associated gas, rich gas, or dry gas, depending on how much on the different types of dry mechanisms that you have. Then this is estimated recovery for that primary. I'm going to go with the secondary. Basically, you go and the secondary, you put this is what we call the improvable recovery. These methods allow to recover about 35 to 45%. And you can do water injection, natural gas injection, gas lift, or submersible pump. And then what we have here is the another recovery method, which is the tertiary type. We're allowed to recover more than maybe 50% in some of the cases. And could be a thermal injection or gas injection with like CO2 or nitrogen. So, having said that, basically what we're putting here, we put up the whole conditions of what we have to start flowing that product. So what I talk is, okay, this is formed this way in the reservoir. This is the type of the different types of dry mechanisms where I punch a hole, and now it needs to start flowing through the production flow lines or the gathering pipelines into a hose that is going to process the fluid, and then it's going to be sent somewhere else in the system. So having said that, let's start after 8 minutes of my talking about what is a flow assurance from you guys. So you can tell me in your group chat, what you think with flow assurance is. It's either transport hydrocarbons from one point to another. It is to ensure the production flows 100% of the time, which is called uptime. It's ensure production flows with an operating envelope. It's operate within optimal conditions 100% of the time. Ensure production flows during normal and transit operations, or will you think it's all of the above? I'm telling you that it's not all of the above. It's one of the A, B, C, D, and E. So if you can just shoot me quickly while I'm talking, what you think it is. It's Alex. It's not all of the above, as I said. It is A, B, C, D, or E. So the first hint is that. So the term of what you're thinking, let me tell you something about this question. When you're telling me and I'm seeing, what you guys are responding. Transport the fluid means flow assurance and operability, and flow assurance nowadays is a discipline on its own. And the term flow assurance means, well, we can say to make sure the fluid will flow between the reservoir and the topside, kind of. So I'll give you kind of a hint of what the response could be. And was introduced by Petrobras in the early 1900s when multi-phase flow and transient analysis took off with advanced computers and software such as OIL, ICs, and Pipe C. From the standpoint of a pipeline engineer, it was at that time, in the early 90s, the pipeline engineer, with the help of the production and process engineers, to determine, based on different stages of the subsea development, early, mid, and late life, the fluid composition, the length, the pressure drop due to friction, the temperature drop, etc., the inside diameter that holds the design flow rate, and insulation, and on the mechanical injection requirements to avoid common issues such as a hybrid and wax. So in the early 90s, I myself as a pipeline engineer, we used to do the flow assurance. It wasn't that complicated. However, in the last 30 years, flow assurance have grown exponentially, and the knowledge is passed through a specific discipline, which is flow assurance. So what is C? I say C, I see F. I don't see a lot of participation. That's what I don't see. So we need a all the it's kind of tricky, all this, because all of them can can be kind of rough. But let's try to explore which is actually the one that is correct. So having said that, D, V, C, A, okay, what else? C, 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 C. Okay, this is great. I have a lot of questions. All of them could be right. However, the one which I didn't see it yet is what it says here. Hold on a second. I need to see this. Okay. Here. So what we have here is ensure production flows 100% of the time. And it's pretty simple, because flow assurance is assure the production flows. And actually assurance is 100% of the time. All of the others, as I see here, all of the others, it's ensure production flows within an operating environment is operability. Operate within optimal condition is operation assurance. So you need to remember that production and operating envelope mindset is never stop operation. The mindset for operating people is we never have to stop operation. The mindset for the design people is comply with the design codes and with the system design lab. And several accidents have happened because of this cultural difference between engineering, design, and operation. So if you see, for example, people that are operations will be pumping, no matter what. And sometimes, they will increase the flow as much as they can. They didn't care. They will put products just to thin the viscosity so they can improve the flow. And actually, they will not care about the temperature. They will increase the temperature as much as they can if that improves the flow. And sometimes, or most of the times, most of the accident is because of these mindsets that are different. When you design under certain design conditions, and when you operate, your mindset is to maximize your flow. Okay. This is another question that you have, just to save you in your mind how much money you can have. For example, if you're producing 100,000 barrels per day and your platform shuts down because of a blockage, which is a flow assurance risk, say wax, say hydrates, doesn't matter, and it takes 2 months, sorry about the misspelling, to clear, and it costs you approximately 24 million bucks just to repair that. How much does this unplanned shutdown actually cost the operator in terms of cash flow? So here you can assume 50 barrels per day, annual return of 5%, design life for 20 years, and use this financial equation. And when you do that, remember that money received early is worth more than the time. So when you do the cash flow future value, you're actually using 67 million dollars. So the time value of money is the concept that an amount received earlier is worth more than if the same amount is received at an early time. So it is important that this opportunity cost of not having this amount in an investment, it's causing a lot of financial issues. So, flow assurance issues needs to be solved because they mean, a lot of money. In terms of flow assurance in the timeline, what we have is, you know, uh, basically now what I said before is it was really important just to keep the operation ongoing all the time to assuring flow. And now the question is how important flow assurance and operability are within the project timeframe, which is shown here shown in the figure appraised led. So between flow assurance and operation assurance, the flow assurance and operability group covers all the phases of the project from concept to operation. The flow assurance it's a diverse group and it's focused mainly on delivery from well to processing facilities, which requires interface with many disciplines. We can see here in this graph that early integration between flow and operation assurance allows an optimum balance of OPEX and CAPEX. And the main point here is the flow assurance and operability issues are part of the entire life cycle of the project. I'm not going to go with this quiz. This is okay. This is flow assurance and operability. Let's start with one-on-one issues. So we need to go from point A from point B. So now the idea is understand the main concepts for offshore conditions, including flow assurance and operability. Let me see if I have how I'm doing here with the messages. Okay, supposed to blah 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 blah. Okay, yeah, shoot me if something is going on. Great. So the picture shows the application of flow assurance and operability offshore between the reservoir, point A, and the processing facility, which is point B. In this case, we have basically here, we need to assure flow assurance, means assuring flow. In other words, we need to get from point A to point B, and operability, we need to get it 100% of the time. So offshore, we are dealing with fluids that are usually, no, they are presented in 2 or 3 phases. It's a gas and liquid, oil and water, etc. So pressure and temperature conditions are key to determine the flow pattern between these points. So pressure conditions are key to determine the pattern flow from transporting from point A to point B. I'm not saying anything completely different from what you guys know. There's temperature, there's pressure to what goes from point A to point B, and there's also temperature conditions that I need to understand. And the pressure and temperature are included in what we call in the fluid the phase envelope, and that's what we're going to get into the concept. So for flow assurance 1.1, you need to understand that things are changing because of pressure and temperature, and everything else can be put in a figure, which is the phase envelope of that fluid. So we need, in order to assure that 100% between the reservoir and the host, we need to manage the hydraulic and the thermal performance for both steady state and transient conditions in order to assure delivery of the target flow rates at different reservoir life conditions, which is early life, mid-life, and late life. And then we need to determine for those conditions to ensure the best performance, the line size, which is the pipe ID, the optimization of the architecture, it could be dual lines, a cluster, a daisy chain, which is the production profile at different reservoir life conditions, as I said before. And then what will be the insulation requirements? We could have insulation requirements which are active, which are passive, like foam, or we can have active systems like put electricity within a pipe system, just in a pipe. We need to know also about the fluid properties and chemistry, which are critical: fluid characterization, alignment. We need to know the when we do the fluid characterization, we need to get the hydrate, the wax, the asphalting, the scale formation curves. We need to do a liquid management also, because special care must be taken on the slags, and we're going to talk about the slags later on, how important they are, and the ability for the top side to handle that slags. Slags basically is a chunk of liquid that can go suddenly into the system top sides. And you don't want to have them because those are quite disruptive. You need to have a liquid management control of your production fluid. And then you need also to manage your solids. With your solids is your wax depositions, your hydrate formation, your scale formation, your asphalt deposition. And I think here you have different type of blockages that I'm talking about. And always, the white one is hydrate, wax is the black one, and then you have a scale, where you can see that also on your piping in your house. Then you need to have also have in mind the equipment integrity and the hardware, which is basically cost for sand erosion and internal corrosion. So there's another issue that you need to take care of, and corrosion is all around your system, and sand control is basically downhole most of the time. I have something here. This is the light catcher. Yes, each of those, as I said, have different type of management. This is the issues, and this is the way you manage those issues. And then systems operability is what I call, or operations assurance, is to ensure that the reservoir is operated within certain envelope of pressure and temperatures, especially in transient conditions, minimizing the flow assurance risks. Chemical injection requirements for scale, asphalting, and corrosion are used or are defined in this area, as well as other operating philosophies during a shutdown, blowdown, or pigging operation. So it's not only the management, or you can have, well, I have wax issues, okay, put some chemical wax inhibitors, it's a chemical injection requirement, but you will have also other operating philosophies that you need to handle during your operations in order to avoid wax formation. Well, sometimes you will see these flow assurance issues as management issues, as I put in orange. So you need to remember that insufficient attention to any of those issues may result in a production loss or deferral, a reduced availability. You can have high operating costs, and actually safety risks. So we need to understand the fluid properties, how the fluids flow, and the operating thermal and hydraulic behavior in terms of temperature and pressure, and the impact on upstream and downstream facilities. That's kind of summary of what flow assurance and operability is. So let's start with to understand what actually what actually is this thing about the change in pressure and temperature along the fluid path and its relation to the phase envelope. Here, what you have is as a courtesy of Schlumberger and the steady state simulation of pipe sim, you have a typical subsea production system where the hydrocarbon flows from, and I'm going to put here the pointer, hydrocarbon flows from here to the top sides, and um, and uh, and after that we goes to the after this process it goes to the export line. In this path, we find different components hanging from the tubing hanger here, you know, such as the well completion done after drilling and perforations, release casing and tubings. When I go into that, you know more than me on making holes on the ground to find oil. You have the downhole safety valve, which is important. The storm valve, we call it in Spanish, or the surface control subsurface safety valve. I have it written here, so I can say it right. The main purpose of this valve is basically shutting the well in the event of a loss of the wellhead integrity. And it can be controlled hydraulically. Actually it's controlled hydraulically. There's only one that is electrical in the market. And then you have also gas lift if you need to go for artificial lift. This is not a class on well integrity or well completion. So let's see. I'm gonna try to be. I need to get here with my pen out. Okay. Oh, I need to change laser highlighter. Let me see. What is it? Oh, here. So I'm gonna get rid of that. Oh, I can work with this. So I'm gonna have the pen, the highlighter here. Let's go with highlighter. No, the laser here. I have a laser point, and I can work on the. And I can remove my. If I change that, okay. Sorry for this. Technology is killing me. Where is it? 10. Okay. Here it is. So I'm going to get rid of all that stuff. I'm going to put this stuff here, and I'm going to try to see the pressure changes for it. So I have all these pressure changes along the flow line. And then it's moving all around. I have all these temperature changes all around my system. We have pressure changes, the completion, tubing, safety valve, the flow line, and I have also my temperature changes along my system. And those could be, you can see convection, you can see conduction, you will see friction and heating, the Joule transfer effect, cooling and heating. All that is included as temperature changes in your flow line. And then you can have another analysis for that. I'm going to go into that to match whether it's inflow and your outflow at the point of interest, which you have your flow rate here. That's the optimal condition. But sometimes you put in hydraulic fracture and you increase your inflow and you increase your flow rate. Or you put a pump, and then basically what you do is you also increase your flow rate by having a submersible pump. So this, having said this, we have the production now in a steady state and it's flowing, and there's some issues here. The production system, we're flowing now, two-phase flow. We know that now, as I explained during this travel, flow experience pressure and temperature drops along the way, which can be seen in the fluid phase envelope, as I see that there. The phase envelope is the diagram used to show fluid pressure and temperature conditions, and which distinct phases occur and exist. In this example, we see only the bubble point curve with the phase envelope, which is where bubbles or gas start forming in the fluid, and um, and then you have also the hydrate and scale curve, which are derived from the fluid characteristics and how it's formed. The production path, as you can see, goes from the bottom hole to the reservoir, and here it's going to the wellhead, and then it's going to the rises way, and then it's going to the topsoil. So you can see here in this phase envelope how the diff, which is basically pressure and temperature, and I showed you before the different pressure drops and the temperature drops in the system, how you can put it in the phase envelope, and you can see what is happening with this fluid, and if it's forming or not scalar hydrates, and you need to take care of that. So when you put it in a actually phase envelope, we maximize. We will see that what actually looks like. This is the pressure and temperature of that two-phase flow between the 2 points, and this is the different phases that you have. You know, liquid on one side, then gas, and then you have liquid and gas inside the envelope. This is basic thermodynamics. And you have your hydrate curves. Then you have one side is you form hydrates, the other side you don't form hydrates. We will go a little bit more farther on this issue later in the presentation. Have the wax. You have the asphaltenes here. What else you have here? You have the scales, some scales, different types of scales. And here is where you have your reservoir, and this is where you have your separator, and you need to go from there to there. So you need to go from your reservoir to your separator. So you can see here, because of the different changes in pressure and temperature, what is going on with your risks, with your wax, with your hydrates. So you can see here that, for example, I'm going to have some at the reservoir. Well, maybe sure at the tubing formation of some scale formation. Usually at the tubing, top of the tubing, I may have some asphaltenes formation in this area, and also changing phase. With that changing phase, I have no hydrates still. However, you know, there's some wax here that is being formed all over the place that I need to mitigate, and I'm going into the host, and then I have some hydrates that I need to mitigate in this area. So with that, I'm having the basically an operated envelope in which I need to work my fluid from the host, from the reservoir to the host. And this operated envelope is what defines, you know, all the flow assurance and operability. Flow assurance means that I need to flow from this point to this point, from this point, from this point to this point. I need to flow, I need to have flow, and I need to have it 100% of the time. So I need to find out that all my operating conditions that I'm going to have inhibitors for hydrates, inhibitors for wax, scale formation, all that things are contained and treated so my flow can be done 100% of the time. So it's not a stop. There's no blockage. So what flow assurance and operability means, as I said before, assuring flow 100% of the time. What will be the consequences on the pipeline and host facility of non-managing flow assurance risks, such as slags, hydrates, asphaltenes, or scale plugs? It could be a pressure surge, separator shutdowns, piping vibrations, separation efficiency issues, deferred productions due to shutdowns, reduced availability. We already mentioned, you know, all of that, and I think the answer is all of the above. So, well, we need to Okay, what we need to do is what it is, all it is. What we need to do now is to understand how the reservoir fluids that we described initially in terms of density and phase composition. So there are different, I don't know, I think main issues that I want you to understand here, or the key learning point is that uh, you have a fluid composition, which is important. The concept of fluid composition is important for your flow assurance. You need to have your pressure and temperature is quite important, and then also your volume, how much flow you can put together. And there are different properties that are quite important because uh, your gravity changes, your gas oil ratio changes, your water cut changes, all those things that moving from one point to another point in different stages of time, because what I showed you with the phase envelope was specifically time frame, a certain time, but it's going to be moving all around the time. There are different pictures of that phase envelope, and things are changing constantly, because the reservoir is live. So all your gravity, your density changes, your gas to oil ratio changes, your amount of water changes. So everything has to be included in your design because at the initial stages, for example, density and phase compositions are used to define the fluid, but those things are changing later on. So, you design for the best or the optimal condition, but you need to also design for what it may happen later on in life. So, as I said here, I show all the different things that you may be having, you may have, sorry, and the different pressure uh, phase envelopes for the different types of reservoirs that you may have. You know, take a look on how the wet gas, the dry gas are. A dry gas is basically a really small thing with everything is, and you work here, and here you have your reservoir conditions, and here you have your separator conditions. So if your phase envelope is this, you're basically working in a dry gas reservoir. So you're flowing mostly gas. In those cases, you know, it's one phase flow. It's quite kind of there's a lot of less issues there. Sometimes, most of the time, you get your phase envelope like this, and this is when you can start having wet gas. And the wet gas, you have start having a lot of condensate. You're going from your reservoir to your separator, and you start moving in this area, condensating a lot of having condensate. And you need to deal with the condensate because it can give you a lot of slag formation. Wet gas is typical wet gas reservoirs is what you find now in some parts of offshore in Argentina with the Sea Lion project, which was stopped because of the situation in the industry now. What you are going to find in Mozambique, a lot of wet gas. A lot of wet gas you're going to find in Australia. A lot of dry gas you're going to find in the reservoirs in Qatar, for example. Um, and most of the projects that we are seeing now are we have this the wet gas condition. Okay, and then we have here this one. Let's see. This is also this is called a gas condensate. Huh. Well, better than me. This is the way you see all your fluids in your reservoir. But what I want to show you here is the volatile oil and the black oil. The black oil goes a liquid and goes here. If this is phase envelope. And then you get here, usually you move all around your reservoir with pressure drops. And then you get around here sometimes, at the wellbore, the wellhead, and then you start moving around in two phase in your flow line. It's two-phase flow, and then you start getting all the issues about hydrants, etc., until you go to the separated conditions. So that's what I'm moving on. Okay. Dry gas, fluid type. I mentioned about this specific gravity. Um, this is now in two-phase pipeline flow. We have liquid and gas, and we need to deal with this. And a condition that you have in two-phase flow is when gas flows at a greater linear velocity than the liquid, what you get is liquid holdup. Usually, the gas at the pressure is moved at a different velocity of the liquid in those phases. So what you get is the liquid getting behind. The liquid getting behind is, hey, I'm starting accumulating here in this point of the flow line. So it's getting accumulating a whole liquid holdup. So, and if I say, hey, I'm coming in here until it develops enough pressure and it gets boom, like a bomb, it's having a slag. And a slag is what you don't want to have because it's difficult to manage. So, as I said, all the flow, different type of flow regimes that you may have, is going to depend on the velocity, the fluid properties, and the topography. And this is also important to understand when you have two-phase flow, that you will have different flow patterns, which could be, and again, I'm talking about here the phase envelope again. Here is the phase envelope, and the hydrated watt curve, the asphalting curve, your operating profile. You're going from this point to this point, and the different scale formation curves. You will have different flow patterns along you move, from the reservoir point to the facility, because they have different pressure drops and temperature drops. This flow patterns are the stratified, the bubble with high liquid velocities, annular, high gas velocities, and the slag, what I call when you have moderate gas liquid velocity. So the relative velocity between the liquid and the gas is what defines your flow pattern. So the behavior of the gas and liquid in a flowing pipe will produce different characteristics depending on the interaction between each phase. So the flow regimes that you can have is the stratified flow is the liquid flows along the bottom of the pipe and the gas flows over the top. The liquid holdup in this regime can be large, but the gas velocities are low. So it could be either smooth or wavy depending on how the velocity of the gas are. But it's a nice flow to have. So you can kind of control it. The bubble flow the pipe is almost filled with liquid, and the free gas phase is present in small bubbles. The bubbles move at a different velocity, but have little effect on the pressure gradient except for density. So the pipe wall is always contacted by the liquid flow. So this is typical when you do gas lift. When you do gas lift, you try to have this bubble flow. So when you actually say, well, this bubble flow makes the fluid lighter, and you can do a gas. Basically, that's what gas lift is. And then the annular flow, as I can see here, the annular flow occurs at high gas velocities. So most of the liquid is entrained in the form of droplets in the gas. And because of gravity, there is usually a thicker liquid at the bottom as opposed to the top of the pipe. So, and the last one that we have is the slag. So as you can see, liquid velocity and the gas velocity. So the different relationship between liquid velocity and gas velocity will give you the flow pattern. So the slag is you have waves of liquid that moves around the pipe, and this basically it's a surge wave that you don't want to have. The bubble velocity of the gas is greater than the one in the liquid, and the liquid, as I said, gets behind, and when it develops enough pressure, it jumps into you, and you don't want to have that. So there are pressure correlations associated with each flow pattern. Okay, and now in two-phase flow, it's not only friction dominated like in single flow. Now you have also gravity dominated because of the density and the amount of liquid hold up in the line. So that is quite different between single flow and two-phase flow. As a punchline, I want to tell you that we need to maximize flow with minimum cost, which is the smaller ID possible, avoiding slag formation during operating conditions over the project lifecycle. So one of the things that flow assurance, again, you need to remember, maximize the flow, minimum cost, which is the minimum ID possible, avoiding a slag formation during the operating conditions of the project. That's what we want to control when we flow from this point to this point, from the reservoir to the facility. The slags are basically transient conditions that are difficult to manage and create operational issues. So it will define the size of my slag catcher and the vibrations that I'm going to have on my equipment, and that's what I want to avoid. So slag flow is a no-no. I want to have stratified or bubble, Let's see if I have some questions here. How do you develop the various compound codes based to establish the operated envelope? Okay. Okay, I need to turn on pointers. So let me see. Highlighter pen, laser pointer. Okay, I'm gonna have my laser pointer now, and I'm gonna move with the keyboard. I'm also learning here. So I have a question here. Is what are some of the non-chemical physical elements that contributes to deposition? Non-chemical situational parameters. I'm gonna leave that question up for the end. How do they develop those various compound curves based to establish operating envelope? Well, basically what you do is you have your fluid composition. Your fluid composition will, we will see that in the presentation, will allow you to develop your phase, your curve envelope. Okay, so we have that, as I say, friction dominated, gravity dominated on your flow rate because of the pressure drop. Liquid hold up. I'm not going to get into this, so we need to cover a lot of other stuff. But basically, what I'm looking at here is at superficial velocity between the liquid and the gas. The flow patterns here is valid at 1 in the system. There are different slags, flow patterns for horizontal pipes. and for vertical pipe. Usually when you get into the riser, and if you are going to the slag, the base of the riser is where you form a lot of slags, and then you may have gas leak at the riser base to avoid this problem. And and I mentioned about avoiding slag flow, which is one of the things, and simulation software is required for all of this, which is kind of simple. Okay, so why accurate prediction of liquid oil is so important in two-phase flow application? I mentioned that several times. So ensures adequate design of the slag catcher. That could be indicates a potential of slag flow formation. Yes. Ensures a system effective design of operation and defines two-phase flow behavior. I don't think D is the question. I think it's C. But mainly, you have to remember that the difference in hold up along the line means potential blah blah blah. What is this here? And the system needs to be designed to avoid this possible. So yeah, it's C. We need to have an effective design and operation. Liquid management, as I said, is one of the most important things that we need. So a key condition, we need this slide is to understand why the concept of liquid hold up is so important in two-phase flow. A key condition in two-phase flow through a pipe is that typically the gas fraction flows at a greater linear velocity than the liquid, and then a slippage takes place and the liquid hold up actually occurs, and it needs to be managed. We already said that a couple of times. So this is the pressure drop that you will have in a two-phase flow. We have a gravity based and the pressure based. So let's then represent in the pressure versus flow rate. This is a pipe with a fixed outlet pressure. So at high flow rates, the liquid hold up pressure drop is friction dominant, and a low flow rates with a high liquid hold up, the pressure drop is static dominant. So low flow rates, I have a lot of liquid, I need to hold it. So it's gravity, it's dominant in my calculations. It's not only friction. When you have a lot of velocity, it's friction dominant and behaves like a single phase flow. This is the liquid hold up and the gas over ratio. So there's several things that we need to understand and comments and conclusions from this chart. This is the liquid content. So we have a lot of more liquid and less liquid content. We have a lot of flow rate. So when we have this, high flow rates, less liquid content. This is what we call an stable flow. We don't want to have this. We want to have this stable flow. And we want to be in the operating region within that area. We don't want to be here. We want to be on this area, and then we want to be, not have a lot of high velocities because it may have erosion, but something that we can handle. So you see in this graph, explains you in terms of inlet flow rate and liquid hold up, the same graph as we saw in the phase envelope, and now we are seeing the operating envelope in a different way. So several things that we need to understand from this graph is decreasing pipeline diameter increase the flow rate, shifting from unstable flow to stable flow, and decreasing the arrival pressure. For example, when we choke at the top size, it's going to move from minimum stable flow to the left. is this. Okay, so if I want to at low flow rates, um, hold on a second, here it is. What is happening is, again, I'm going to say, if I decrease the arrival pressure at the choke at the top side, I'm going to shift from this to this. So the idea the idea is in the is that the top side slacks the pressure by choking. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm moving from this. I'm choking at the top, and I'm telling you, hey, what I need is I'm putting uh, the top side choking effect. I'm controlling the slants by choking, which is a common operational feature that you do uh, that you do. So that's the main concept that I want you to understand when I manage from one region to choking. What is happening? So let's go on our risks. Now we're going to know about risks and mitigation. What we want to mitigate, in terms of what are the main flow assurance issues and challenges that the flow may face, and the worse that all of that is shown in the figure changes during transit operations and during the life of the field. In this case, pressure and temperature changes over the time of the operation and then over the life of the reservoir. I mentioned that before. So can you make it a little bit more complicated in terms of flow assurance? No, everything changes. So the main risks associated with the flow assurance are flow blockages by solids that can be built up in the pipeline and potentially reduce or stop the flow, either scale, wax, hydrates, or asphalt. We'll talk a little bit about later. The flow instability that can potentially be unmanageable by the operations uh, personnel, like with the slags and emulsions, and uh, and then the loss of containment caused by erosion, um, and corrosion. So this is integrity issues, fluid issues, operational issues. So, and then you can see it from a different point of view, um, which is the production chemistry. So the production chemistry, you have wax, um, which is a solid form, um, basically it's an alkane uh, that is forms below certain temperature, which is the wax temperature formation, or the wax appearance temperature, watt. You also have the cloud point, which is when wax starts to appear. Then you have what else? Hydrates, for example, which is a crystalline ice structure forming at high temperature and low temperature. You may have also asphaltenes, which is a tar-like asphalt type solid that forms it's an aromatic actually. It precipitates when the fluid density decreases as a result of a pressure drop or mixed with different fluids. And then you have scale. The scale is another deposit. It's an inorganic mineral, water formation like calcium, carbonates, sulfates that form due to the change in pressure and temperature. This is what we see in our pipes, water pipes at the house. Uh, Other issues that are related with the flow velocity. We talked that. Okay. What are the issues I can talk? Associated blockages. Oh, I mentioned that. Yeah, the other issues that I have here is erosion and erosion, yes, which are associated with integrity, with loss of containment. Corrosion, erosion, CO2 and H2S contents, the most important. And then there's some, here I put emulsions or operations assurance, which are associated with flow instability, which is mainly using topsides, which is the slagging, as I mentioned, and also foaming and emulsions that you want to avoid, especially topsides. So let's talk about, I think slagging is the first one that we have here. Let's see what we have here. Slag. No? Yeah, slagging is the first one. Let's see if I do have, there's a video here. Yeah, yeah, I don't have time for videos. So basically, the key learning point of this slide is to understand that slagging is a disruption that is difficult to control and needs to be avoided if possible. The slag flow, again, happens on every production system with intermediate superficial velocities of gas and liquid. And it could happen because of the following. It could be at a low flow rate, which is late life condition, production shutdown and restarts, because of a low gas oil ratio, because of high water cuts, because of flow rate changes, because changes in the subsea operations like transients, or because of a decreasing reservoir wellhead temperature. And that slag formation is that intermittent and could represent no risk sometimes if the terrain is horizontal or flat, but unfortunately, you know, it's not always the case. Slag flow is by nature unstable, and therefore, in every production system, slag has to be managed, either control it or avoid it. And there are four types of different slags. One is the hydrodynamic, which is everywhere, and that's the pigging, which occurs during pigging operations. And that's the normal type of slag. And you have the severe type, which is usually predicted using transit order simulations, which is the terrain at the riser base and the turn up at the separators. And the slag mitigation practices includes optimized flow line and riser size for a full range of flow rates and operating conditions. So when you do your analysis, you need to run start life, mid life, late life, different flowing conditions, different flow rates, different type of water cast conditions. So you need to optimize the ID for different conditions along the life of your system. You need to also design a slag mitigation for pigging to remove the liquids in long pipelines. Another slag mitigation practice is gas lift, either at the well bore, at the tree, at the manifold, or the riser base. Another one will be a first state separator sizing to handle slag. You handle your first separator to handle slags. Another one is, a slag handling facility, which is slag catcher. A slag catcher, you know, it's easy to put on shore, could be huge, but you don't have space to put it on platform. You can run another mitigation could be a gas lift delivery inside the riser. Yeah, just basically you put a coil line pipe inside the riser that inject gas to make gas lift. You can have a flow management software also that monitor and control. So that is the part of the flow assurance systems that, for example, this Orman Lange in Norway has, that it's a fantastic control system where they can predict pressures and temperatures, superficial velocities, define the patterns at the flow patterns at different stages or different points along the system, and then run real time actions to mitigate slag formation. Or one of the other one that I said, typical common is choke, either subsea or at the top side with a choke valve. Either you choke at the subsea tree or at the top sides, so it's choke control. And then you can simulate all that in your Olga simulator. Oh, here it is. Different types, and then you can see. I should have hit that. Can you see the stuff moving? So tell me yes or no in a chat, please. Great. And then I do have something here. Operational risk. Okay. Slag is flow disruption. I think no. Yeah, let me show you here, guys. The in highlighter here. Okay, what I'm trying to do is put a video, but I can't. So I'm gonna keep going. So here, basically, what it's going is moving. The flow is moving. It's moving here. It's moving here, here, and then it goes up to this point, and the gas keeps moving. So the liquid starts holding here, can hold here, hold here, hold here, and then gets formed. All the liquid hold up gets here until you develop enough pressure on this side, and then boom, all the chunk of slag is going into the pipeline, and you want to avoid that. Okay. This is showing a typical Olga simulation where you see the pigging for the transient pigging conditions, where you see the pig moves the liquid against the terrain. So in condensate systems that they form a lot of condensate, had a lot of liquid hold up. The pigging condition is the worst case scenario for slag formation. So when you pig is when you need to be prepared to get all that liquid and put it somewhere. So sometimes it's a big slag catcher on the onshore facility, or like most people do when operate wet condensated systems, is they try not to pig at all. Okay, here is a question here. Is slagging issues are more severe in deep water or in shallow water? That's some food of thought. So let's see. Slagging issues move more severe in deep water or in shallow water? Here is in deep water flow lines. The higher pressure and the low temperature with the fluid, which is close to the bubble point, and the gas is formed or condensate is formed, and so with gas with severe slagging due to rain or pigging, yeah, this is usually onshore. So what we have here, let me see here. Okay, as I said, slagging issues are more severe in deep water or in shallow water pipe. It says in deep water. Why? Well, because in deep water I don't have the facilities to hold those severe slagging issues. So I need to deal in subsea systems with the slags much better than in shallow water, or if I have an onshore facility, I can put a slag catcher there to hold all the liquid. A little bit of emulsions here. Another issue of emulsions, which are a mixture of two substances that are not mixturable. Okay, if not, you will have a solution. and they're usually stabilized with emulsifiers. Emulsions occur in almost all phases of production and processing. You have they form when the oil and water, which is the brine, comes into contact with each other, and there is when there is sufficient mixing, or when an emulsifying agent or emulsifier is present, they don't form. But the amount of mixing and the presence of emulsifier are critical for the formation of an emulsion. So there are several sources of mixing. They call it a shear, and it could be a flow through a reservoir rock, the bottom hole perforations, the flow through tubing, valves, feeding and chokes, surface equipment, gas bubbles released because of the phase change. So those are conditions just to form emulsions. Water and oil, it cannot be mixed. So they form a stable emulsion while flow lines within the pipeline system. But with oil and water, droplets are dispersed in other phases depending on the water cut. An emulsion inversion, there's an emulsion inversion rule. So below the 30 to 60% water cut, oil is usually in a continuous phase, the water in oil. And you have 30 to 60% water cut, the water is in the continuous phase. So the oil is in water. So why? Because they have emulsifiers that allow them to flow to a stable emulsion. So basically, and the main point, the mitigation, the main point here is what we have. I mean, we have emulsions and they can form, and then we need to treat them, you know. And this is something that the flow assurance and the process guys or the facility guys will have issues. And when you have those issues, you need to talk to the operating people and incorporate them, so you can incorporate that in your design. Oh, well, here I talk about this. I'm going to have hydrate, wax, asphaltene, and scale. And I'll talk about all these issues already. And then how they form. You get all your curves from your characterization fluid, the formation of each of those, and then you place those curves in your operating envelope, and then you go from the reservoir to the top sides, and then you see what is formed, and then you start mitigating those issues. So I'm going to tell I'm going to copy this question. So what are the mitigation issues? For wax, so you can use chemical injectors, or you can do a thermal method, or you can have added. For example, you can have dispersants. Usually what we use is insulation, active heating, hot oil, or circulation. You use these methods, and the other one will be pig. So I need to define which is the most effective method. Usually it's a mixture of everything. So what you do is basically you have wax inhibitors. You also help them with insulation. So insulation with wax inhibitors, and then you pig once in a while. The idea is that you don't pig. Why? Because you lose money. So you can have active heating also, but you always have a little bit of chemical injection because the chemical injections are those well, you cannot have everything on chemical injectors because it's going to be too expensive. So have a combination of these two. Hydrates. On hydrates, you can have inject methanol, MEG, or low dosage inhibitors. You can also have insulation, and active heating helps with wax. So basically what you do is you solve works and hydrates all together with insulation or active heating and inhibitor. Well removal, that is after the separator, but you can have the separator subsea. Yeah, could be, but it will be a different processing facility that you have subsea. Asphaltenes, there's there's no thermal method because you cannot remove it with heat. They don't melt. So you have chemical injection is mostly the most common one that you use, mainly injected at the borehole, maybe downhole or the borehole. And then scale, you solve it with chemical injection. So those are the main methods that you have. Chemical injection, remember, is expensive. Heated flow lines are not widely used. Depressurization for hydrate is another method that you can use. It's an operating part of your operating philosophy. And what else I have here in my notes that I can tell you? Somehow. Okay, next slide. This is a typical locations for chemical injection. One is the wellhead platform or the compression production platform. This is the compression production platform or the wellhead platform with subsea. So you can have here, look, at your top size, you can inject emulsifier, chlorine inhibitors, all these inhibitors. Methanol usually is injected is injected top size, but mostly downhole or at the top of the tree. And you can downhole, you can have all these inhibitors and also the emulsifiers injected there, depending obviously on the pressure and temperature of your reservoir and the composition of your fluid. Okay, the other one is erosion requirements. Erosion, you need to restrict the velocity basically, and these are typical fluid velocities that you may have to have in your mind. For liquids, 15 feet per second, or for gas, less than 45 feet per second. So erosion velocity for wet gas systems will be higher than for liquid systems. Okay, maybe the order of 25 feet per 25 feet per second. And there is a formula here that you have. And then the other one is sand remediation measures, because sand could be pretty bad for your elbow, your chokes, your separators of top sides. And downhole, you have the gravel patches or sunscreen, and actually sand kills all your submersible pumps are killed by sand. And so you need to have filters basically downhole to handle this. Sorry for that. So what else can I say about sanded particles, different solvent mitigations? Yeah. So whatever is left in the tubing flow into the facilities must be controlled using sign detection systems. So small particles tend to flow within the oil phase, stabilizing emulsions, which is good for the flow line, but it could be bad for the separator. And then larger particles tend the flow to produce water and have negative effects on the elbows and chokes, which is same thing on the three-phase separator. So in other words, sand erosion should be included in your startup strategies. So to deal with that. So this is different cases. Well, this is how you determine the erosional velocity for a crude oil with a 54 pounds cubic density. You do that, and then you determine it, and you do the equation, and it's 17 feet per second. So it's a little bit high, but it's within the limit. So for water, for example, erosion is No, for water, no. I forget about what I'm talking about water. This is a different issue on civil engineering. That is for optimal flow. Uh, by material selection, I don't want to get into that. This is uh, quite. This is kind of, I mean, this shows basically how you deal with your erosion models and your erosion model and your corrosion model. Basically, you try to avoid H2S and CO2 most of the time. But water injection lines is oxygen. Okay, how, luckily for us, these fluids don't contain a lot of oxygen on them, but they do have some particle mediums there that can be handled also. Okay. Modeling the operating envelope, we should add, see the operating for example, flow rates, pressure loss. We saw that. Okay, yes. Modeling the, yeah, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to model the operating envelope. So I'm going to go again on our chart that we put here. So we go with our liquid hold up. Liquid hold up, grade the flow rate. We have flow stability in this area. That's what we want to design. So we have the pressure loss, and stable flow in this area, unstable flow. This is gravity oriented. This is pressure oriented. We want to be on this area. And then while we operate our different timeline, our pressure loss moves with time. And so the operating envelope is moving with time, and this is your reservoir pressure. This is your reservoir pressure as going at the beginning. You have a high flow rate, and it's going. Sorry, at the beginning you have a gas flow rate, and it's going down at the end of the line. And then this is your hydro curve. You have hydro formation on this side, no hydro formation on this side. This is the wax formation. This is the gas velocity. Usually, the gas velocity will go from will go down, during time. This is your erosion that you may have issues with, and this is going to be your pressure, operating envelope. Your envelope, for operations assurance, will move in time. You want to avoid erosion, to avoid wax formation, to avoid hydro formation, and you need to be within the flow stability, so your slags are not an issue. And this is moving all around in time. So this picture shows the different issues moving in time with the pressure and temperature. So, which condition expose the production fluid to risk that can stop? This is all of the above. Basically, all those issues that can be risk for your flow. So let's go now to the scope of work and talk about how we typically put. We need to have basically these are the typical activities for flow assurance. So we're going to start with fluid characterization. Let's see. Fluid characterization. We need to have a good fluid definition. We need to have an analysis done. Then we put the mitigation, and then we do the operating guide. So we do the fluid characterization, the thermohydraulic analysis, the risk mitigation, and we do the operating strategy for that. So all the interfaces are critical. We have here fluid samples, production profiles. We need to get fluid samples to characterize the fluid, to get the curves. We need to have the production profiles to see at different times what the expected production profiles are at early life, mid-life, or late life. We use this software is the most known in the industry for that. PiFNP for steady state and Olga for transient. And then we start putting a strategy based on those analysis, uh, defining the the equipment specifications for storage of chemicals, etc., and how we're going to operate, do our operational assurance. And then the typical deliverables are four typical deliverables that we have, which is the steady state report, the transient report, the flow assurance strategy report, and the chemical injection report. That kind of defines the typical scope activities that we have for the for this. Fluids, here is this slide, basically the key learning point of this is understand um, that to characterize the fluid properties correctly, we need to have good samples. So there are different type of samples with different type of wireline computation tools. There's different videos that you can see. So you need to get good samples that you need to go. You need the you can have pressure, volume, and temperature measurement at the field, but you need to go with all those things. You need to go to the lab and define your phase behavior and define your curves for hydro formation, for escape formation, etc. So, and get a representative fluid to avoid the contamination. You need to have good samples. So, what is fluid characterization? Fluid characterization, I don't know, I guided that slide. So you need to characterize your fluid, you send it to the lab. So when you have there with that data, they will determine early life, midlife, and late life. And then, well, those are required for final investment decisions and economical evaluations. The production profiles, which is production as a functional tab, are required for fluid characterization. Production profiles are required to be estimated through the entire lifetime of the project, and this is responsibility for the reservoir engineer, which needs to characterize the fluid in time, assuming different water cuts and different gas over ratio values. In reality, what happens is the reservoir engineer will generate as many profiles as needed, but not only for flow assurance purposes, but mainly for economic purpose, in order to establish the business case for the development, including the cash flow calculations, and need to determine P10, P50, P90. For design purposes, the typical production profiles required for flow assurance are early life, midlife, and late life. So this is a production. This is a production profile, certain time. This is time to start declining. This is the decline rate. This is the decline rate, and the production profiles are also required at the end of the appraisal phase. Usually, when you do the appraisal phase, your flow assurance goes with the reservoir engineering at the same time. For production facilities, they have to be early in the stage of the project. You need to have your flow assurance down if you want to design your infrastructure. And then you finalize your flow assurance where you're finalizing your infrastructure. But most of the time, your flow assurance runs behind the design for the facility. You need to consider all the sensitivities to generate production profiles. So if you it's impossible to do it. I mean, to consider all the sensitivities to generate production profiles is impossible to apply numerical simulations. The cost will be prohibitive. So the reservoir engineer with us uses analytical and probabilistic methods, including material balance equations, to determine the decline rate that we see there. In simple terms, maximum production per well is easy to determine. The point is for how long, and then the most important to estimate is how it's going to decline. So it's the reservoir people, they need to do that. So the fluid characterization, you get all that. There are typical formations for different natural gas and you know uh, formations here, but a typical well stream fluid composition will look like this. Okay, they are performed by a third-party lab, and usually you use multi-flash or PVT sim. And the typical deliverable says you need fluid composition, viscosity versus temperature, viscosity versus water gas versus time, was and parafin profiles, asphaltene onset pressure, and hydrate plug-in status, which is a hydrate curve. All of this you use to start running your simulation. Okay, so if you don't have a good fluid characterization, all your flow assurance calculations in Olga will be trash. I mean, it's and you know how many times in the project, they change something in the fluid characterization that you say, hey, it's gonna change everything, and things, those things happen. So phase envelopes, different phase envelopes for different curves, they provide that, and then you get into the analysis, and you use Olga. I said that different stages. Um, this is an Olga model for a subsea development tie back to shore. Um, this is a steady state. This is not important. This is the transient simulations that we do. We call that up, and then basically on the transient simulations, this is important that you do not only the thermal operating conditions, but on the transient simulations, these are that you need to cool down, start up, shut down, depressurization, hollow circulation, water position rates, and then the slagging evaluation, liquid hold lateral and pigging requirements. All this is in the transient report. This is a scope work picture. You establish the design basis. You go into the analysis. You interface with the other engineers, other disciplines. You define your strategies, and then you assess your capital cost. So basically, you do this is when you establish your design basis. You do reservoir type, fluid type behavior, all that. So this is at that phase, and then you start doing your hydraulic design, to determine the ID, usually steady state. You have also steady state for arrival temperature, and then you do the transient. You double check with the transient, all the transient calculations. And the most important is the cool down time. And then you start interfacing with other people for your operating guidelines, and you define your all your interfaces, which is with completions, reservoirs, chemical vendors, operation process. It's quite flow assurance interacts with all these disciplines. All of these disciplines interact with flow assurance. Flow assurance is the heart of any offshore subsea project. So here is a quiz that says what flow assurance delivery identifies the risk and mitigation strategies for slagging liquid management, wax paraffins, hydrates, asphaltanes, scale deposition, corrosion risk, secondary recovery. So this is this I would say is C, is the strategy report. I'm not gonna. This is a steady report. This is gonna be the transient report, and this is the chemical injection report. So basically, what we have overview here is a little bit of all this, and I think with that I don't have anything else to say, and it's time for a Q&A. And let's see what the I'm going to discard annotations, and and I'm going to stop sharing. And then when I stop sharing, I'm gonna put my face here, and I'm gonna be ready for questions. Let's see if I have Jorge Manzar. Juan, yes. Juan, how you doing? You can unmute yourself.
Hello, Diego. Good morning.
Hey, morning. So I'm here. I'm here just to take questions. I think it's
11:49.
Yeah, 11:29.
50.
Yes, 10 minutes to 12. So this is the joke about the driver and the professor. There was a professor who was going all over the country delivering speeches and conferences, and the driver was taking him all over the place. So one day the driver says, "Hey, I know your stuff so well, so let me present it." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." So the guy went and presented for the professor. So he finished the presentation, which was excellent, and then started taking a lot of questions. And then all the questions were questions that they were already asked. But he was doing so well, the driver, that at one point, one of the participants asked him a question that he didn't have any clue of that. So, looking quite thoughtful, he told that participant, said, "Look, that question is so simple that I'm going to tell my driver sitting in the back to respond to that." So, who is the driver and who is the professor? You know, I'm the driver, and Juan Manzano is the professor. He is very well known in the industry. I would say, top of the world, guys. So, any question that I cannot respond, Juan will be able to do. So, shoot me with any questions. I'm saying here, let's see. What are the non-chemical physics elements, situational parameters that contribute to deposition? See, this is from Thomas. I want to know what the situational parameters you refer to, but basically depositions, either for wax, hydrates, asphaltenes, will be a combination of wax and hydrate will be a combination of pressure and temperature conditions in which they will form. And you try to avoid either with insulation or with a different and active method to mitigate that formation. However, on scales and asphaltenes, that situation may be different and difficult to handle. So what you do most of the time is use inhibitors. However, Juan can understand much better what the situational parameters are. Do you understand, Juan, what he's talking about, situational parameters?
Diego, that's a very complex question indeed. For one thing, depending on the risk that you are considering, either asphaltene or wax or scale, depositing on the inner walls of the pipeline system depends on a myriad of factors. Surface finish, previous buildup of the same material that is depositing, fluid velocities, flow pattern and two-phase flow, like you said, pressure and temperature, presence of surfactants and other chemicals. So it's very, very complex problem. In fact, all you can do is to apply the traditional actions or measures to prevent those depositions taking place and manage with operations using remediation procedures like pigging if you can. But keep in mind that all these risks can be present in the production stream in the well itself. You can have asphaltene deposition in the well, not even in the well, in the oil trap itself. So it's a very difficult question, and it depends on a number of factors.
I think he's talking, Juan, he's saying an example of the situational parameters would be like geology of the terrain. So I think what you can talk is about what the geology of the terrain will impact formation, for example, of slags, or which is one of the key issues in flow assurance.
Oh, definitely. I didn't get the geology effect. Definitely, the formation of the oil in the ground, in the subsurface, has a profound effect through the composition of the fluid. Depending on the split of heavy ends and light ends, um, it's something that might create a totally different scenario for deposition to take place. That is one specific example is asphaltenes. Asphaltenes are very complex, high molecular weight molecules that can, with a small composition, with a small percentage in the composition, can have a dramatic effect upon the production. So definitely how the oil became entrapped in the subsurface and the geology might have a profound effect.
Okay, so we have here, how do they develop those various compound curves based to establish the operating envelope? Well, the compound curves of hydro formation, wax formation, asphaltene, and scales are basically done during the PVT classification, and the third-party labs, they provide that to you. Anything else you want to add on that, Juan?
Yes, the PVT seam tool or the multi-fluid envelopes of when you're going to start observing issues with hydride deposition, hydride formation, you name it, the wax scale can be predicted with those tools. But a word of caution is necessary. All these tools are physical and chemical models that have some level of uncertainty. And that's why in all the development that Diego has mentioned during this presentation, the people involved, the engineers, the geologists, and everyone involved in this development had to take into account that these are not very accurate models. They give you a good visualization of what's going to happen, but you shouldn't expect a very high accuracy in the prediction of these envelopes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what he's showing is this, how do you determine this curve or this graph? This graph is kind of a summary of all the stuff that I talked about, and basically each of those points is, I would say, thousands of analyses that you do with the simulators, basically, and you can establish this type of curves.
Oh, well, by the way, the dotted lines, the dark lines indicating pressure loss is not with the PVT seam. That's the other tools that Diego mentioned before, either Olga or pipe seam tools.
Yeah, you have all this here. You get all this with PVT seam with characterization, but all these curves are thousands and thousands of analyses in a pipe seam or Olga in order to put all this together to try to guess, what is going to happen with your system during producing during all its design life. which you actually don't know because you are assuming something at the beginning, but it can change. It can change later in life, and you don't know that. So you are assuming a lot of assumptions and a lot of analysis until you have not only your design, but also how you're going to operate. Let's see what other questions I have here. Okay, I'm going to close this. I need where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, here. I need to close. I'm going to stop. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Technology kills me, even though, you know, I learned how to use Zoom 2 weeks ago because my wife does Zumba classes and she has about 20, I think even more participants than me in this case. So, and I learned a lot about Zoom, but I didn't know how to deal with his chat. So, regarding the curves, regarding the curves tags, I was wondering if they were defined with software or load testing. That's fine. Well, you know, ask me more questions. You know, that's one of the things that is new for me with this type of interactions with you guys. Is I kind of, I mean, I developed the interactive discovery learning methodology, and I need to have you here in front of me. So I need questions.
Well, I have unmuted, but on the other hand, I guess some of the noises are coming in. However, Alex, do you have other questions in the chat? If not, I think we can interactively ask questions to Diego.
Yeah, I think he's pretty much answered all the questions that are on the list, and I think he's got the chat room up, so he's doing well.
Okay. So, any other questions?
Well, this is Juan again. I joined the meeting quite late, and I was curious if during the presentation Diego mentioned the new trends in production regarding long tiebacks, subsea tiebacks, and subsea developments.
No.
Because the new trend in development, in particular in deep waters, is going towards having more sea to prevent some of the risks that the deal addressed during this presentation, namely separation for gas condensate fields, subsea compression of the gas separated, subsea pumps, single phase pumps to pump the oil or the condensate taken out of the separator, things like that. All those new trends are in some stage of development, to be monitored before spread the application in other new developments. So people are watching what's going on with the few samples that are already in commercial use. And the trend is towards having more longer and longer tiebacks of new wells to existing facilities in order to improve the economics of the projects. That's the way the oil and gas industry is going offshore.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question? If not, Diego, I have two questions to you. One of them I did not quite understood. At low temperature and pressure, how do you get dry gas? And I understand by dry gas, you mean methane, right? One of the slides that I saw, that's what, I don't remember which, I didn't count the slide number. Diego, are you there? Hello, are we having some problems?
No. I mean no. The issue here is with when I no, it's my problem with Zoom. Now I know where the stuff is. I think you're talking about when I was talking about dry gas, I was talking about the different type of reservoirs, different pressure and temperature conditions. If you move around at pretty high, usually high pressures and high temperatures, you are moving around when the area, well, it depends on when you do your field characterization, but you will be moving around on the right side of the curve. And in those cases, when you move from the reservoir to the top side or to the host, you are always in a gas area, one phase area. I shouldn't have to say dry gas. It's only gas.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. One other question that I have is that I understand that you are using PVT-SIM for these compositional analysis. There are other tools for that as well, other simulation packages. Anyway, however, PVT-SIM is the most popular one. And I understand after you do the PVT-SIM analysis, that would tell you at what stages, at what temperature and pressure variations, etc., you're going to expect asphaltene precipitations or hydrates or emulsions, all of those, right? And then you use your, measures to remedy those problems. Is that how you would approach it? And also, Olga, does it do just transient analysis, or you can turn it off and you can use it for a steady state analysis as well? It's like PiFNP.
Okay. PVT-SIM multi-fluid software are capable of generating tables of fluid properties as a function of pressure and temperature.
Yes.
That's the basis for feeding the information to dynamic simulator like Olga and even PiFNP. So that information involves viscosity, densities, fraction of gas and liquid, you name it, surface tension, all the fluid properties required to plug into the dynamic and steady state simulators. Now, to answer your second question, yes, most of the time we use Olga as the steady state simulator. And the differences between Olga steady state and PiFNP steady state are becoming less and less because it's the same company that is developing the two. But yes, you can use Olga for steady state.
Okay.
And in fact, it's the initial condition before a transit. You need to run it in a steady state before a cool down situation.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, most of the time, I mean, nowadays we use Olga. PiFNP is used less and less, unless you are doing some preliminary analysis. You know that you go with PiFNP. The PiFNP works pretty well with oil, you know, composition oil.
Black oil, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And then you can get a lot of stuff. You know, it's simple to use, but the flow assurance guys, as a pipeline engineer, I did use PiFNP. I never used Olga. And Olga, if I remember the whole history, started developing, you know, back in the 90s, and a few people could use it, you know. And nowadays, obviously, it's the tool that everybody uses. And there are other pieces of software which I don't remember. One is with Kongsberg, which I don't remember the name. Juan, do you remember the name of the other one?
Well, I forget the names. Schlumberger has one, and then Schlumberger bought out another company in Edmonton, Canada, and acquired that one. I totally forgot, blanked out with the name of these ones. I think, what is it? We have a Schlumberger representative here. Maybe he can tell me about that, tell us about that. And then also, Canadian companies, computer modeling group, they have their own as well.
Yeah, there are several. There is a Leda Flow by Kongsberg. There is a Alpha Scene. There is a very good tool as well for dynamic analysis. There are several.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. But PVT-Sim is much more popular than the other ones. Gain a lot more name and fame. Thanks. Who else have questions to Diego before we close out and go to our breakout rooms?
Diego?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Shahid. Let me volunteer a question.
Sure, go ahead.
From in Gulf of Mexico, if you just focus on the fields over here and the flow assurance from fluids perspective, which one is the most common problem that we see? Is it because of wax or hydrates or asphaltene or scale? Or
Asphaltene.
Okay, from my experience, and I'm gonna pass it to Juan, is wax and hydrates. We have a really quite benign fluid here in the Gulf. It's called this sweet oil, and so most of the problems are hydrates and wax. However, farther we go in the Gulf, nastier the products, and then you have specific cases with different things to mitigate. You may have asphaltenes. Scales is also kind of a common problem. You also solve it with inhibitors, but I think going further in the Gulf, nastier the issues. And Juan, what are the projects that you are aware of that you deal with asphaltenes, or what projects have you dealt with asphaltenes in the Gulf of Mexico?
In the Gulf of Mexico, in the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico, basically the Mexican waters, you can find heroin with a relatively high content of asphaltenes. In the Cantarell area, for instance. Towards the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico, asphaltenes are here and there in a few places, but it's not the rule. And I should emphasize something that is very important. The risk, the flow assurance risk, have a different time scale. For instance, hydrates are the highest risk because when they arise, you have very little time to react in a matter of hours or minutes in order to prevent a disaster. But in the case of wax, asphaltenes, scale, or even corrosion, those other problems also in time are creating problems in time. They deposit and create necks inside the pipeline restricting the flow. But it's not, it's a totally different time scale.
fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Well,
Any more questions?
okay, go ahead, please.
One. Hello. Dieguito,
Sí, dime.
I have a question. In deep water, tertiary, have you seen any problems with sand or rock coming up into the pipelines and so on and so forth?
on that, Juan, I have no idea. Juan.
No, the question is, for the tertiary, there are some clients that are not using sand control. They are trusting that the rock will remain solid and they will not see rock or sand coming up the pipe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you have when you do the in situ analysis of samples, you get an idea of what the kind of the solid formation you have. Also, when you are operating and then you have kind of you mitigate with filters downhole some of that. Then when you put in your operation your submersible pumps, if you put that, usually they don't last too long for those basically for those issues. But in terms of sound control, I don't. To tell you the truth, the question is kind of tricky. I'm trying to understand what you mean for that. Juan, did you understand that question?
Yes. Francisco, my experience in the Gulf of Mexico is that most operators complete their wells using a gravel pack because the wells are so expensive that the risk of fine production or even rock for appreciable amounts of sand production is a very high risk for them. In particular because handling solids on the top of a floater is a very, very expensive operation and cumbersome. So most of the operators complete their work using gravel pack. But in case the gravel pack fails or you have production of fines, that is something that the operator usually tries to manage by reducing the down. In other words, if a well in a cluster is producing more sand than others, after it is spotted using detectors near the wellhead, the well is choked somehow to reduce the drawdown to the point of diminishing the production of fines or sand.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is suspicion that they may get some sand, they will complete with sand control.
Yes, the risk is too high, Francisco. Think of a well that might cost you $350, $400 million, completed, ready to produce. You want, for a well so expensive, you won't be saving devices like sand production detectors because you want to monitor if that problem is going to be present during the life cycle. But in case that you are facing an issue with the completion that starts producing solids, then the only way to cope with that is reduce the drawdown on the well. And that is very critical for gas condensate fields or dry gas fields when you start the well. You go really slow in opening the choke. Use 1 pounds of drawdown increase per hour or per 30 minutes in order to very gently start well.
Well, when you see clients that really want to do the right thing, tell them to call your best friend Francisco. He has the screens.
Okay.
Okay.
To you.
Juan, I have a final question. We have to really move on. If I may ask you, in Gulf of Mexico, these are high producing wells. So do they only use ESPs, or they for sand control? They, in addition to the gravel packing, do they use progressive cavity pumps, which really prevents sand and they last a little longer?
Good question. Artificial lift
Mm-hmm.
for deep water wells in the Gulf of Mexico, it's in my knowledge, mostly in a very high percentage restricted to gas lift.
Mm-hmm.
ESPs or PCPs are high risk for one of these expensive wells. Usually these are devices which are very useful to increase the delivery pressure to life for the well, are used in onshore wells, because in case that you have a stuck or a failed pump downhole, is a very high risk and a very high cost repair.
Yes.
You need to bring a rig for deep wells in the Gulf of Mexico at a very high day rate. You need to pull the whole completion to replace an ESP that has failed after 1 year or 2 years of operation. So that's why operators are hesitant to use these devices other than gas lift, if any.
Okay, great. Thanks.
May I ask one question as well? Just
Go ahead, please.
thank you. Now, this is just a curiosity question, that sand control and all these things is unique to clastic. Is there any flow assurance issue which is unique to carbonates?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Is there any flow assurance issue which is unique to carbonate?
To carbonate.
Yeah, because like sandstone is, sand control will only happen in sandstone. But can we have something which will only, when we are in carbonates, we have to be careful that this, we are acidizing in a different way. We have fractures over there. We inject cold water and we can have heavy oil emulsification. So I'm giving you clues. Is there anything you have experienced as unique to carbonates?
Yes, of course. When you skin issues in the well, then you start considering an acid job on the well to to bring back the original or production resistance had downhole. But when you do the acid job, you are risking to have effects on the matrix itself. So those things that are outside the scope of work of the flow assurance is the reign of the production engineer. But of course, the production engineer shall work in conjunction with the flow assurance engineer to optimize or streamline the operations when you are expecting to produce solids as a result of a well job that you've done. And some wells are limited to 1, 2, or maybe 3 jobs in their life cycle in order to minimize the issues that you are referring to.
But if the carbonate is poorly consolidated, fine-grained, rather than grain stone or pack stone, that's the classification of carbonate limestones I'm talking about. In that case, you could expect similar scenarios like sand control, sand, instead of saying that siliciclastic sand, this is now a carbonate. I thought you might be able to expect that situation, but we don't have those kind of carbonates that we are producing in the USA, to the best of my knowledge at the moment. That's mostly in ME and GCC nations. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you are correct. You are correct.
Okay.
And in fact, when you drill a new well, when you drill the exploratory well, when you drill the appraisal wells, it is compulsory that you take samples, core samples.
Exactly.
The core sample is not going to give you the whole set of answers that you are expecting, but at least it gives you a lot of information as to the bonding of the sand grains in the matrix. And then at that point, you start considering that information as a very important input for the well completion engineer, who's going to design the screens that you're going to put down hole in order to prevent those issues. How are you going to deal with that during the life cycle of the well? What kind of treatments you are expecting to perform on the well? Because if you're going to perform acid jobs on the well, you need to have the subsea facilities to deliver the acid to the wellhead. And those things need to be planned in advance before even the project is sanctioned. So all that is part of the set of information that the project manager need to handle in due time.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I think let's wrap it up over here if there are no other questions, because we can go to the breakout room. In the meantime, I would like to thank both the presenters. Diego, you had a wonderful presentation as well, because it's very detailed. You brought out the issues and you said what the problems are, how it happens, and how what are the remedial measures, etc. I think I really enjoyed it. I believe a lot of us, even though it's a late session, it's almost nearly 12:30, still over 23 people are hanging around still, as you can imagine. Patiently listening to you as well. So that tells something, and there are so many questions that you have had.
Well,
So
that's
also
good.
something about it. So these are all dedicated MITs we have at the moment.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, to me, it was a first time I'm doing this Zoom thing with and then I kind of ask the questions to you guys, so we lose that. And but the other good thing about it is, I think it was to me it was a great experience. And luckily, I brought Juan to answer all your questions. You know, because you guys who love to drill holes, you know, they have a lot of questions related to that, which I have no experience with. And Juan has managed not only Florida, but he has managed production fields in Venezuela. So he has extensive amount of experience covering all the technical issues. I think Shahid has a question. Do you have a question, Shahid?
Hey, do you have? I think we'd like to have a round of applause for both our presenters before we go to the breakout room. And I will hand it over to Griffin Smith to handle that breakout session.
Thanks, Salim. Thanks to the presenters for great talks.
Yep.
So I don't know how many of y'all have been in breakout room sessions on Zoom, but what we'll do in a few seconds here is I'll click to open the breakout rooms, and I've already assigned 3 to 4 people to each of 5 rooms. If you can join the breakout room, that would be great, and we would like you to network with each other. You can give your 30-second commercial. We had planned on 20 minutes, but I think we'll probably keep it at maybe 10 minutes and see how long people can meet just because of the time. If you cannot stay for the breakout rooms this time, that's all right. We hope to see you in a future one. So when I open the breakout rooms, you'll see something on your screen that invites you to go to breakout room 3 or 4 or whatever it is. So you can click on that to join it. After you've had enough time in that room, you can choose to come back to the main room that we're all in right now. You'll have the option to either come back to the main room or just leave the meeting entirely. So it's up to you. We hope to see you in the breakout rooms starting now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.